The R Pro Show is back to hit you with another knowledge bomb because I was asked the other day how to handle the deposit of earnest money and when exactly it has to be done. Because you have the real estate commission contract and it says within 3 days of the execution of the contract, the buyer must deliver as earnest money, which shall be deposited. So the contract says within 3 days of execution, you have to deliver the earnest money if you're the buyer. But then we flip over to the real estate commission rules and they have a rule that says something a little bit different. And it says all escrow funds shall be deposited before the end of the third banking day following acceptance of an offer or receipt of escrow funds unless otherwise agreed to in writing by all parties. So how do you handle this? The real estate commission's rules say if you get earnest money, it has to be deposited within 3 banking days. But on the flip side, the contract says the buyer has to deliver the earnest money within 3 days. So what's the difference? Well, stick around because I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about handling earnest money. So at first glance, these two things might seem a little bit contradictory to each other. One says 3 banking days, one says 3 days, one says delivery, one says deposit. So how do you handle it? Well, let's walk through the real estate transaction and it'll explain exactly what needs to happen to make sure you keep your buyer in line with what they have to do under the contract. So in the contract, it says within 3 days of execution of the contract, the buyer has to deliver the earnest money. So let's look at that by itself to start with. And it says it has to be done within 3 days, calendar days, not necessarily banking days, calendar days. The buyer has to deliver the earnest money wherever it's going. Now, oftentimes that's going to be to the title company, but it could also be a broker's trust account. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, all that has to happen is the buyer has to make sure that wherever the earnest money is going, it's delivered within 3 days. And that's 3 calendar days, unless it ends on a holiday or weekend, and then you just go to the next day. So how does that work in practice? If the contract is executed on Thursday, what's 3 days from there? Now remember, the first day is day 0. So we've got Thursday as day 0, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and assuming Monday is not a holiday of some kind, that means you would go to the Monday for when that has to be delivered. A little bit different scenario that's more standard. If perhaps they've executed the contract on Monday, we've got Monday, day 0, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That means the earnest money has to be delivered wherever it's going by Thursday. So how does that really work in practice? Well, oftentimes they give you the money. The buyer's going to come to you and say, here's the contract executed and here's my earnest money check. Can you get it delivered for me? So this means now you're being placed in the shoes of the buyer. So you have to make sure that the buyer's in compliance with the contract because it has to be delivered within 3 days. So now let's switch gears real quick and flip over to the real estate commission's rule and what it says. All escrow funds have to be deposited within 3 banking days of when you receive them. So now this gets complicated, right? Because if the buyer gives you the money, what does that mean? Do you have to comply with the contract that says 3 calendar days to deliver it, or the rule over here from the real estate commission that says you've got 3 banking days to deposit it? Well, these rules in this contract are talking about 2 different things. We're in 2 different categories here, so let's not confuse these 2 things. The rule over here from the real estate commission says if you receive funds that you have to deposit into an escrow account, you have to do it within 3 banking days. And a banking day is simply a day when banks are generally open. That's going to be Monday through Friday, not to include Saturday or Sunday, and not including any banking holidays, which are generally going to be probably your federal and maybe some state holidays. So if it's a holiday, you go over to the next day. So here's what it says. If you get money as a broker that has to be deposited within your escrow account, you've got 3 days to do that, 3 banking days to do that. Earnest money from a transaction that's going to be deposited in your account, then you got 3 banking days. If it's a security deposit from a tenant, 3 banking days. But on this other hand here, when we're looking at the contract and the buyer has given you the money to deliver it, you have to pretend like you're the buyer in that circumstance because it's a different requirement. They have a contractual requirement to deliver it within 3 calendar days. Here's how that will work in practice. If you are helping a buyer and that contract is executed on Monday, and say Tuesday, Wednesday go by, and now on Thursday, that buyer gives you the earnest money check. Thursday's day 3, so that means you have to get it delivered that day. Just because it came into your hands doesn't mean you now have 3 banking days. Help the buyer comply with the contract because the buyer's obligated to deliver that to wherever it's going. The title company, the listing broker, whoever it is, if they give that to you on day 3, you got to drop everything and make sure that it gets delivered that day. Now, on the flip side, here's how it works if maybe you're the listing broker, and that's actually where we're going to deposit the earnest money, because the contract by default says if we don't name a place, then it's deposited in the listing broker's trust account. So let's use that same scenario. You've got the buyer executes the contract with the seller on Monday. They deliver it to their realtor on Thursday, which is day 3, and that realtor gets it to you on Thursday. Great, the buyer's in compliance now because it was delivered to you by that 3rd day. Now you, because you're obligated to deposit it within your trust account, then we flip to the rule that says, okay, I'm getting something and it has to be deposited in my trust account. When do I have to do that? 3 banking days. So now you have until early that next week, because that's when that 3 banking day deposit rule kicks in. So here's where it gets complicated, is if that buyer gives it to you on Thursday and that's day 3, and you're helping that buyer, it's not deposited in your trust account, you got to deliver it that day. You got to drop everything and get it done. So keep those 2 timelines separate. You've got the contract requirement. The buyer has to deliver that earnest money within 3 calendar days. And if they don't do that, then they could be in breach of the contract. So if they give that money to you as their real estate professional, you have to make sure that you are stepping into the shoes as the buyer to make sure that that's done within those 3 calendar days. Now, on the flip side, if you are receiving money that's deposited into your trust account, you've got 3 banking days to do it. So again, that rule and the contract, 2 separate things. They both say 3 days, but they work a little bit different and they apply to things a little bit differently. So keep that in mind. Your rule here is if you're helping the buyer and they give you the check, make sure you're getting it delivered within that 3rd day. And if you are receiving earnest money to be deposited into your trust account, you've got 3 banking days to get it done. I hope that helps clear up that timeline. Hey, listen, head on over to rpro.academy, sign up for our newsletter email list. We are not going to spam you with a bunch of junk. We're going to start off and send you the RPro transaction checklist, which I think is a nice little resource that you can fill out and hand it to your client so that they understand when deadlines have to be made, including things like when earnest money has to be delivered and where it's going. That's on the checklist. You can help out your clients keep track of what's going on and yourself by going to rpro.academy, signing up for that email list and checking it out. Now, thank you so much for tuning in again. We appreciate you watching the RPro show or listening. If you're listening to us online, we love it and we love your feedback. So please give us some reviews, give us some feedback, leave a comment if you're watching. I love to see those and love to respond to them. So if you've got any other questions or any feedback or any thoughts, put them in the comments and we would love to see those there. Thanks again. And we'll see you next time right here on the RPro Show.